The piercing scream echoed through the hallways of Northwood High. It was a sound that would forever be etched into the memories of those who heard it, a sound that shattered the mundane routine of a typical school day. It was a sound that stopped hearts, a sound that spoke of an unimaginable horror. Students and teachers alike froze in their tracks, their minds struggling to comprehend the reality of what they had just heard. The scream was followed by a deafening silence, a silence that was soon broken by the sound of hurried footsteps and panicked whispers. The hallways, once filled with the chatter and laughter of students, were now filled with an eerie sense of dread. Students poured out of classrooms, their faces a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. They gathered in the hallways, their eyes wide with terror as they tried to make sense of the chaos unfolding before them. At the center of it all, a scene straight out of a nightmare. The once familiar and safe environment of their school had been transformed into a horrifying crime scene. Mr. Davis, the history teacher, lay in a pool of his own blood. His lifeless body was a stark contrast to the vibrant life he once brought to his classroom. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, his body still. The sight was too much for some students who turned away in horror, unable to process the gruesome reality. Standing over him, a student, Hamza, his hand gripping a blood-stained knife. The image was surreal, almost as if it were a scene from a horror movie rather than real life. Hamza's eyes were wild, his face a mask of terror and something else. There was a coldness in his gaze, a chilling detachment that sent shivers down the spines of those who saw it. Something cold, something that sent chills down the spines of everyone who saw it. It was as if he were possessed by a dark force, something beyond the comprehension of the terrified onlookers. The police arrived within minutes, sirens wailing, lights flashing. Hamza didn't resist. He stood there, motionless, as if in a trance, the bloody knife still in his hand. He stood there, the bloody knife still in his hand, a chilling smirk playing on his lips. It was a smirk that spoke of a twisted satisfaction, a smirk that would haunt the nightmares of those who witnessed it. As he was dragged away in handcuffs, a collective gasp went through the crowd. The students and teachers watched in stunned silence, their minds racing with questions and fears. The question on everyone's mind, who was this boy, and what had driven him to commit such a heinous act? Hamza had always been a quiet student, never one to draw attention to himself. The answer, as it turned out, was far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The investigation revealed a web of secrets and lies, a dark undercurrent that ran through the seemingly peaceful town. This wasn't just a simple case of teenage angst gone wrong. It was a story of manipulation, of hidden agendas, and of a young boy pushed to the brink. This was something far more calculated, far more dangerous. Hamza's actions were not those of a momentary lapse in judgment, but of a meticulously planned and executed crime. This was just the beginning of a story that would shock the community and expose the dark underbelly of the town they thought they knew. The incident at Northwood High was a wake-up call, a stark reminder that even the most idyllic places can harbor the darkest secrets. The news spread like wildfire. It was the kind of story that gripped the entire community, leaving everyone in a state of shock and disbelief. Whispers and rumors filled the air as students and teachers alike tried to make sense of the unbelievable revelation. Hamza, the quiet, unassuming student, was a killer. Or so everyone thought. He had always kept to himself, blending into the background, never drawing attention. But now his name was on everyone's lips and his face was plastered across every news channel. But what no one knew, what remained hidden behind a veil of official secrecy, was that Hamza wasn't who he seemed. Beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary student lay a complex web of deception and intrigue. His real name was Zain, and he wasn't a student at all. He was a highly trained undercover police officer, tasked with a mission that would test his limits and push him to the edge. He was an undercover police officer, a young rookie, thrust into a dangerous world. Zain had been chosen for this mission because of his ability to adapt and his unwavering dedication to justice. Zain had been given a mission to infiltrate a notorious drug ring operating within the high school. The stakes were high and the risks even higher. Failure was not an option. The ringleader was a shadowy figure, known only as the chemist, someone who had managed to evade the law for years. The chemist was a master of disguise, always staying one step ahead of the authorities. To bring him down, Zain had to become one of them. He had to immerse himself in the world of high school students, gaining their trust and uncovering their secrets. He had to disappear into the shadows, become someone else entirely. The transformation was not just physical, but mental and emotional as well. Months of preparation had gone into creating Hamza's persona. Every detail had to be perfect, every aspect of his new identity meticulously crafted. Zain had immersed himself in the role, learning the slang, the mannerisms, the attitude of a troubled teen. He spent countless hours studying the behavior of teenagers, practicing until he could mimic them flawlessly. He'd cut his hair, changed his clothes, even altered his voice. Every change was a step further away from his true self, and a step closer to becoming Hamza. He'd become someone else, someone he barely recognized in the mirror. The line between Zain and Hamza blurred, and he had to constantly remind himself of his true purpose. And then came the fateful day of the stabbing. It was supposed to be a routine operation, a staged conflict to draw out the chemist. It was never supposed to happen. The plan was carefully orchestrated, every move calculated, but in the chaos, something went terribly wrong. It was a scene gone wrong, a prop knife mistaken for a real one. The moment of realization was a split second too late, but in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The carefully laid plans unraveled, and the true danger of the mission became starkly apparent. Zain's carefully constructed facade began to crumble, threatening to expose his true identity and derail the entire operation. The line between his two identities was now a dangerous tightrope, and one misstep could mean disaster. The classroom buzzed with nervous energy. The usual chatter and laughter were replaced by hushed whispers and furtive glances. Everyone knew something big was about to happen, something that would change the dynamics of their high school forever. Tensions were high, the air thick with anticipation. The students could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them, making it hard to breathe. It was as if the very walls of the classroom were closing in, trapping them in a bubble of anxiety and fear. It was the day Zain was supposed to prove himself to the chemist's crew. For weeks he had been preparing for this moment, going over every possible scenario in his head. He knew that failure was not an option. This was his chance to show that he was more than just another face in the crowd. A fight had been arranged, a brutal initiation into their world. It was a test of strength, courage, and loyalty. The chemist's crew didn't just let anyone in, you had to earn your place. And Zain was determined to do just that. Zain's opponent, a hulking senior known as Brick, cracked his knuckles, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Brick was infamous for his ruthless nature and his ability to break even the toughest of opponents. He relished the opportunity to put newcomers in their place. Zain felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of fear and excitement. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing in his ears like a war drum. He knew that this was his moment, the culmination of all his efforts and sacrifices. He knew this fight was crucial. It wasn't just about proving his worth to the chemist's crew, it was about proving his worth to himself. He had to show that he had what it took to survive in their world, to rise above the challenges and emerge victorious. It was his ticket into the inner circle, his chance to get closer to the chemist. Zain had always admired the chemist from afar, fascinated by his intelligence and charisma. Being part of his crew meant gaining access to power, respect, and opportunities that were otherwise out of reach. But as the fight commenced, a chill ran down Zain's spine. Something felt off, a nagging sense of unease that he couldn't shake. He tried to push it aside, focusing on the task at hand, but the feeling only grew stronger. The supposed prop knife planted by his handler felt different, heavier. It was as if the weight of the blade carried with it the burden of the consequences that were about to unfold. Zain's grip tightened around the handle, his mind racing with doubts and fears. Before he could react, Brick lunged, the blade catching the light. The movement was swift, almost too fast to follow. Zain's instincts kicked in, and he moved to defend himself, but it was too late. The scream that ripped through the room was not one of victory, but of horror. The sound echoed off the walls, a chilling reminder of the reality of the situation. The students who had been watching in anticipation were now frozen in shock, their faces pale with fear. Brick stumbled back, his hand clutching his side, blood seeping through his fingers. The sight of the crimson stain spreading across his shirt was a stark contrast to the bravado he had displayed just moments before. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Zain stared in disbelief, his stomach churning. This wasn't supposed to happen. The plan had been simple, a staged fight to prove his loyalty. But now everything had gone horribly wrong. This wasn't part of the plan. This was real. The gravity of the situation hit him like a ton of bricks. He had crossed a line and there was no going back. The consequences of his actions were now painfully clear. The trial was a blur. The days that followed the incident were a whirlwind of police interrogations, media frenzy, and legal proceedings. Zain found himself caught in a storm he couldn't control, his fate hanging in the balance. Zain maintained his Hamza persona, playing the role of a troubled teen who'd made a terrible mistake. He had to convince everyone that he was just a misguided youth, not a cold-blooded criminal. It was a role he had to play to survive. His lawyer, a seasoned public defender, argued for leniency, emphasizing Hamza's difficult upbringing and lack of criminal history. The lawyer painted a picture of a boy who had been failed by the system, a victim of circumstances beyond his control. The judge, however, remained unconvinced. He saw through the facade, recognizing the danger that Hamza posed. To him, Hamza was not just a troubled teen, but a symbol of the failures of society. Hamza, he declared, was a danger to society, a testament to the failures of the education system. The judge's words were a harsh indictment of not just Hamza, but the world that had shaped him. He was sentenced to 5 years in juvenile detention. The sentence was a heavy blow, a stark reminder of the consequences of his actions. But for Zain, it was also a new beginning. The sentence was harsh, but for Zain it was a necessary evil, another step closer to his goal. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he was prepared to face whatever challenges came his way. This was just the beginning of his journey, a journey that would test his limits and shape his destiny. The clang of the metal bars shutting behind him sent a shiver down Zain's spine. The air inside the juvenile detention center was thick with the stench of sweat, fear, and despair. Gone was the familiar world of classrooms and textbooks, replaced by the cold, harsh reality of prison life. He was processed, stripped of his identity, issued a uniform that felt like a brand of shame. He was Hamza now, inmate number 3472, just another face in the crowd of lost and forgotten boys. The guards eyed him with suspicion, their faces hardened by years of dealing with delinquents. The other inmates were a volatile mix. Some, like him, were there for crimes they didn't commit. Others were hardened criminals, their eyes reflecting years of violence and regret. Zain knew he had to tread carefully. One wrong move, one slip of his facade, and his cover would be blown, his mission jeopardized. He had to become one of them, earn their trust, all the while remembering his true purpose.